The three-tier cake shimmered under the backyard lights. A symbol of all the years I forced myself to be good enough fell straight onto the brick patio like a clap of thunder. White frosting splattered across my high heels. A piece of blue sugar candy stuck to the hem of my dress. And then a voice rang out sweet, yet cruel. Bend down and eat it. Aunt Claire. Laughter erupted. Not one laugh, but many woven together like blades slicing through glass. My mother laughed the loudest. My sister sipped her white wine, her eyes narrowing in satisfaction. And I stood still, like a statue amid their storm of laughter. I set the silver knife down on the table. The metallic gleam caught the light like a cold scratch across the late summer evening. I removed the apron my mother had made me wear for fun, folded it, and placed it on the chair. Then I turned and walked away. That night, a message arrived. We're cutting off contact. Don't come back. Ava reacted with a heart. They thought they were punishing me. They forgot that the house they lived in, the car they drove, all carried my signature. I typed just one line, tomorrow. I'm removing my name from every one of those loans. At midnight, my phone screen lit up, messages flooding in. More than 100 missed calls. For the first time in my life, I didn't shake. Before I tell you what happened after that party, tell me where you're watching this video from and what time it is. I always read every comment to know you're still here with me. If you've ever been looked down on by your own family, hit like and subscribe, because I know exactly how much that pain hurts. Now, let's go back to that afternoon when their laughter was the last sound I heard, before everything changed forever. The road out of Naperville was soaked in rain. The car lights reflected into long streaks on the wet pavement, winding like a memory being dragged through the mud. With every swipe of the wipers, I saw the image of the ruined cake again, white frosting spilling out like a wound that hadn't had time to scab. The smell of burnt sugar still clung to my wrist, sweet enough to choke. I did not cry. I only heard my heartbeat drown in the whistle of wind against the glass. On both sides of the road, café, scenes, gas stations, supermarkets, receded like film played in reverse. I did not turn on the radio. I did not want any other sound to cut through. There was only the steady roll of the tires on the wet asphalt and the wipers' soft, soft, soft swish, like the measured pulse of a body that had just lost its soul. I didn't know how long I had been driving. I only knew that each mile wore away another part of the memories I had tried to hold on to. The city rose up like a damp film. Lake Michigan mirrored the bridge's yellow lights, stretching into a cold streak. When I opened the door to my small River North apartment, the cool coffee from the morning spilled out, mingling with the lavender scent in an old essential oil bottle. This space was the same, neat, quiet, and carrying the faint chill of tile through the soles of my feet. I took off my shoes. They clicked dry against the floor. The white light from the lamp reflected on the fogged window pane and cast a pale green wash across the ceiling, like hospital light. I hung my coat and touched the wooden table, still dusted with crumbs. Everything in the room seemed to move with my breath, each exhale echoing heavily, as if the apartment itself were keeping its silence for me. I sat down and looked around. The old brown sofa, the curtain half drawn, the notebook left open on the table. Things that usually felt familiar now seemed oddly foreign tonight. How many years does it take for a person to get used to being silenced until it becomes normal outside? The siren faded away. Only rain fell gently on the metal railing. In that instant, I thought perhaps I no longer belonged to anyone. And strangely, for the first time in my life, that feeling did not scare me. My phone vibrated, a short sound, but sharp enough to startle me. On the screen it read clearly, Marilyn Donnelly, family group chat. My finger trembled slightly as I opened it. The message contained just one line. We have decided to cut off all contact. Don't come back. Beneath that line was Ava's red heart. A tiny heart, but it shone on the black screen like blood that had just dried. I stared at it so long I forgot to blink. The blue light from the phone reflected on my sugar-streaked hand, and I realized I was gripping it so tight, the knuckles had gone white. No words. No reaction. Only my mother's familiar line echoed in my head. Her voice cold as ice. Family is for helping one another. Claire. I let out a short laugh. A soundless laugh. Outside. The rain thickened. The wind struck the window frame like someone knocking slow. Heavy. Steady. I reached out and turned off the lamp, letting the phone's blue light paint the wall. It made the whole room look like a tank of cold water, the blue screen light reflecting on the frosting-streaked hands. I opened the message again and read it one more time. Each word was like a blade. But instead of cutting, it carving into my memory of endurance. They thought they had driven me out of their lives, but they had forgotten one small thing: the house they lived in and the SUV. Ava drove both, carried my name on the loan agreements. I opened my laptop. The screen lit my weary face in a tired hue. I moved the mouse and opened a new email. Subject line: release of liability immediate. My fingers typed each character. Remove my name from all loans. Tomorrow. The sound of the keyboard tapped out evenly, like a heartbeat returning after a long faint. I looked up and stared out the window. The rain still fell, but its sound was growing softer. When I hit send, the rain stopped. The room dropped into absolute silence, a silence that did not demand anything, did not punish. In that moment I understood it was not that I had been abandoned. I had just left them. I stood and walked to the window. My reflection flickered in the glass. Wet hair. Sunken eyes. Traces of cake frosting on my wrist. The woman in the glass looked at me as if asking, "Is it enough now?" "Claire?" I pressed my lips together and exhaled quietly. Outside. The city stayed lit. Chicago never sleeps. And tonight, I would not either. The lights from the high-rises reflected into the sky like thousands of reminders that I still existed. I went back to the table and placed my phone face down. The screen went dark, reflecting my face once more, not the face of the obedient daughter, but of someone who had just learned to choose silence as a weapon. And in the last second before I turned off the light, I knew more clearly than ever that very silence would be what would bring the Donnelly family down. Morning light streamed through the curtains. Chicago was still veiled in mist, the glass towers reflecting a cold, metallic silver. I opened my eyes, my throat dry, the faint scent of yesterday's coffee still hanging in the air. On the table, my phone lay face down. I hadn't touched it. I knew what waited inside a storm. I walked to the window. Across the street, a garbage truck rolled by, its wheels grinding through last night's puddles. The sound was like an ending slow, heavy, and final. In my mind, my mother's message echoed. We're cutting off contact. Forever. For the first time in years. I didn't cry. I made a fresh cup of coffee and sat at my small desk. The laptop screen lit up, reflecting my face pale, but calm. I opened the folder named Family Finance. I realized silence isn't the end. Sometimes, it's where everything begins. File after file, email after email, appeared like sharp slices. I reread the old messages, signed for me. Honey, it's just temporary. Family helps each other, it's natural. I remembered I had been on the 14th floor back then. The office lights still on. I just wanted to end the call quickly. So I signed. Now. On the desk. Stacks of bank statements, debt notes, and mortgage contracts lay piled high. Each sheet was a promise that had been exploited. I picked up the first statement. The line read, Lakefront Mortgage, cosigner Claire Dawson, $450 per month. 3 years. Beside it, the loan for Ava's SUV family auto credit cosigner Claire Dawson, $620. 2 years. Total $29,280. I turned another page, a resort bill from Florida last month. A photo of my mother by the pool. Sunglasses on. Cocktail in hand. Caption family deserves a break. I didn't need to make any notes. I understood I had paid for all those fake happy pictures. Another email popped up. Subject line, late fee notice. I remembered how they had called. Sobbing, saying it was a bank mistake. Turns out, I was the only one mistaken. The smell of old paper and printer ink mixed with cold coffee. The room was silent. Only the clicking of the mouse and my heartbeat echoed. I typed quickly into the calculator box, 450.36 plus 600, 2024, equals 29,280. A number. But to me, it was 3 years of self-respect burned away. Every signature is a chain. And this morning, I finally learned how to break them. By noon, I was driving toward the Loop. The Lakeview Bank building gleamed, its silver logo reflecting the gray sky. The glass doors slid open, a cold gust hitting my face. The receptionist led me to the office of Priya Shah, the branch director. She was around 40, Indian American, with warm eyes and a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Claire Dawson. Right, please. Have a seat. I set the folder on her desk carefully, but firmly. I want my name removed from 2 loans. I said, I have documents proving I was misled into signing. Priya paused for a few seconds, looking at me, then at the papers. She flipped through each page, reading the emails with the line, just temporary. The room was so quiet we could hear the pen tapping lightly against the table. Do you know? She said slowly. This is evidence of financial misrepresentation. They used deceptive statements to get you to sign. I nodded. Would you like to file a complaint? She asked. I thought for a moment. I don't want to sue. I just want freedom. Priya smiled, setting down her pen. Freedom, she said, is something you never need permission for. I never expected the first person to tell me that would be a banker. The printing room at the end of the hallway smelled of new paper and hot ink. I heard the hum of the photocopier, the metallic stamp clinking against the rubber base. Priya returned, holding 2 release of liability forms. These confirm your removal as co-signer. The bank will reassign the responsibility to the primary borrower. I took the pen. My hand didn't shake. Each stroke of ink felt like a heartbeat being freed. Beneath my signature came the familiar sound thud. The red seal pressed down, the warm ink spreading. Thud. A second time, that sound echoed in my head like chains hitting concrete. I inhaled deeply. Sunlight from the window lit up the table, making the word released gleam like silver. Priya gathered the papers, her voice soft but steady. You did the right thing. Claire, sometimes. The only way to teach people to respect you is to stop letting them disrespect you. I stood and shook her hand. Her palm was warm, the exact opposite of the cold air outside. For the first time in years, I thought a red stamp could be more beautiful than any rose. I left the bank just past noon. The white light of midday reflected on the glass skyscrapers, the honking taxis, the footsteps on the sidewalk, and the wind whistling between the towers all sounded like a new symphony beginning. I stopped before a window, catching my reflection. The woman in the glass no longer trembled. I thought of my mother, of Ava, of the message we're cutting off contact. Perhaps they were still having lunch somewhere, not knowing that their own hands had just pulled the roof from above their heads. I stepped down the granite stairs. The sound of my heels struck the stone, steady and certain. In my pocket, the phone vibrated, private number calling. I didn't answer. I knew exactly who was on the other end. I let it ring and walked on, blending into the crowd of Chicago. When they wake up, the world they've built upon me will collapse. The Chicago sky was dark, the lights from the high-rises spilling down onto the river in trembling streaks. I sat on an old wooden chair, a cup of tea steaming in my hand. The thin vapor rose and disappeared into the cold wind. No laughter, no music, only the gentle sound of water brushing against the bank like the heartbeat of someone trying to stay calm. I looked down at the river. In the blurred reflection of the city lights, I saw my own face tired, but more awake than ever. Sometimes, what reflects the clearest is yourself. Back in the apartment, I opened a small drawer and took out a worn leather notebook. The pages had turned brown at the edges, the smell of old paper blending with the faint scent of cinnamon lingering from the kitchen. I flipped to the lines I had written at 25. If I'm good enough, they'll be proud of me. If I succeed, Mother will love me. If I give more, they'll need me. I read each sentence slowly, like someone staring at a scar that has healed but still aches. Maybe I once believed love could be bought with sacrifice. But now, looking at the cold numbers in my account, I understood kindness without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction. I wrote one more line. My handwriting steadier than ever. I don't need them to be proud. I only need enough freedom not to have to explain myself again. I once wrote to hold on to them. Tonight, I write to let them go. Night deepened. The small kitchen glowed with warm yellow light. I set the kettle on the stove, listening to the gentle bubbling mix with the rhythm of the rain outside the window. The scent of orange and cinnamon filled the room, brushing against memory. That scent used to belong to my mother every Christmas. She made mulled cider with cinnamon, but now it belonged to me. In this small apartment, in a quiet but foreign Chicago, I poured the water into a cup. The heat touched my hand. That warmth was no longer nostalgia. It was a new kind of peace. There are empty spaces in life. Some don't need to be filled. You just have to learn to sit beside them. I realized not every void needs to be filled. I opened my phone and scrolled to the bottom of the voice recordings list. An old audio file, labeled Seattle April. 3 years ago. I pressed play. My own voice came through trembling. Younger. Weaker. Are we okay? If I can just get through this month, everything will get better. I laughed. The woman in that file sounded like someone else. Someone who once believed that endurance was the only way to keep love. I stopped the playback and started a new recording. I spoke slowly and clearly. Every word deliberate. Claire, if you're listening to this someday, remember you survived. You owe no one anything. Not even an apology. I saved the file. Title to myself. I knew I'd never need to listen again. But saying it aloud made my chest feel lighter. I listened to my own voice not to remember, but to say goodbye. I stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights stretched out like bands of artificial stars. Far away, the Willis Tower glimmered through the mist, like a promise that morning would come. No matter how long the night lasted, I leaned against the railing and took a deep breath. Chicago at night had its own scent, the dampness of the river, the smoke of the trains, and the toasted bread from the bakery nearby. Every sound, every light told me the same thing. Life goes on. I touched my phone and opened a new note. I wrote one single line. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't their silence. It's when you finally start hearing yourself. I looked out at the city and smiled. If you're still watching this video, comment, the number 1. I'm truly grateful for that. I read every comment. I once thought silence was weakness, but now I understand silence is proof that I survived. That morning, the Chicago sky was clear. White light struck every pane of the Lakeview Bank windows as if they had just been polished. I stood before the revolving doors, the sound of my footsteps echoing across the marble lobby. The air smelled of printer ink and coffee mixed with cold air. Miss Dawson, the receptionist's voice carried across the hall. Your papers are ready. I nodded. The signing room was on the 3rd floor, where sunlight streamed through wide glass windows facing the river. A young woman handed me a stack of documents. Thick paper, embossed with the words, "Release of liability, confirmed." I sat down. The pen rested easily in my hand. The ink glided over the smooth page like water. The bank seal came down thud. That sound was sharp, dry, and final. I couldn't help but smile. The stamp sounded like an iron door unlocking, and I stepped through. Alone. Unchained. The door opened, and Priya Shah walked in. Still, that composed grace. Her gray wool coat. Her eyes both stern and kind. "Congratulations." "Claire," she said. Her voice warm and low. "Everything's finalized. But there's something I think you should know." She placed a new file on the desk and flipped to the first page. Mandatory financial reassessment for collateral property after cosigner removal. I looked up. "Meaning?" Priya nodded. "The bank will contact the primary borrower directly. They must verify repayment ability or refinance within 7 days." I leaned back in the chair, my palm resting lightly on the paper. 7 days. "That's right," she said, meeting my eyes. "I imagine they'll be quite surprised." We both fell silent for a moment. Outside the window, the light shimmered on the river like a slow blink. "So," I said quietly, "they're about to get their first phone call." Priya smiled. "Just standard procedure. But I understand how it must feel. Sometimes justice doesn't need to scream only a certified phone call." At that same moment, in the suburbs, the phone in Marilyn Dawson's house rang again and again. The Lakeview Bank logo flashed on the screen. "Sorry, Mrs. Dawson. We need to confirm your mortgage information." Marilyn's voice caught. "Mortgage? I thought that was settled. You are now the sole borrower. Records show the cosigner has been fully released." A crash of breaking glass. Ava ran down the stairs. Phone in hummed. Face pale. "The bank called me. They said the car could be repossessed unless I prove income." Marilyn stared at her daughter. "That's impossible. Claire wouldn't dare." But Ava only gasped. Opening her phone, dozens of notice of reassessment emails flashing like a violent storm. The once lively house filled with noise hairdryer whirs, shouts, and frantic keyboard clatter. Marilyn called Robert, no answer. She switched to speakerphone, her voice hoarse. "Claire, what have you done? You're destroying this family. I wasn't there to hear it." But I knew exactly what that voice would sound like. Sharp, trembling, and full of fear. I didn't need to be there to witness it. I knew how their screams sounded when power slipped from their hands. That afternoon, I sat in a small cafe by Lake Michigan. The glass window reflected the pale silver sky. Outside, the wind carried the scent of cold water and wet leaves. On the table, my laptop was open. A new email from Lakeview Bank appeared. Confirmation: client Claire Dawson has been fully released from all financial obligations associated with loans number LD 8724 and Tier 2-8. FCA 201. I read that line 3 times, not out of disbelief, but to savor the sound of the words "fully released." My finger brushed a speck of dust from the screen before gently closing the laptop. Nearby, a group of students laughed. An elderly couple shared a slice of apple pie. The world stayed peaceful. Only a few houses and a few bank accounts trembled. I sipped my coffee. The bitterness touched my tongue, then melted into sweetness. I didn't need to smile. I didn't need to speak. Only one feeling remained: balance. The only thing that trembled today wasn't my phone. It was their pride. Chicago's sky turned gray. I left the cafe, stepping onto the damp stone pavement. The click of my heels mingling with the wind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen read "Mom 8 missed calls." I didn't answer. Then a message appeared. The bank called. I lost the house. Ava's crying. "What did you do?" I stood still amid the crowd. The sky reflected a deep violet hue of dusk. Like spilled ink, I read the message once, deleted it, and slid the phone back into my pocket. The sound of a train horn echoed from afar. The wind rose, sweeping my hair back. I looked up at the tall buildings, their lights flickering on floor by floor. The storm began with one phone call, and I was the one who scheduled it. Every time I pressed decline, another door from the past slammed shut. The phone vibrated endlessly. On the screen, Mom 12 missed calls. Ava 8. Dad 5. The sound no longer startled me. It was just the fire alarm of a building I'd already left long ago. I sat by the window of my apartment on the 23rd floor. Outside, snow was falling onto the roofs of yellow taxis below. On the table, a cup of coffee had gone cold, its dark foam swirling into small spirals. I set the phone face down, hearing the muted vibration as if someone were calling from another world. Each time my finger hit decline, I imagined locks turning, bolts sliding shut not to keep them out, but to keep myself in, within the quiet I had just learned to love. Sometimes, apologies are wrapped in the shape of blame. Messages flooded in. Marilyn, are you insane? You've bankrupted your parents. Ava, you're so petty. You really want to see me lose everything, Robert Claire. Your mother's been crying all day. What did you gain from this? I read them without replying. Each line was a mirror reflecting their own distorted selves. Then came the voicemails. My mother's voice high, shaking, sharp as a blade. Do you know what people are saying about us? That we're con artists, all because of you. Ava's voice shrill, breaking between sobs. That car was to drive Tyler to school. You know how much he means to me. You're cruel. My father's voice was different, heavy, tired, and sadder than them all, Claire. You're destroying this family. Stop before there's nothing left to save. I played the first few seconds of each voicemail, then turned them off. The sound echoed in the cold room, as if even the walls were memorizing their guilt for them. He wasn't cruel, just weak, and that weakness raised everything that went wrong. I replayed the last voicemail, my father's voice trembling, trying to stay calm. Claire, I understand you're angry, but this isn't the way. You're breaking your mother's heart. You're not that kind of person. Please call me, just to let me know you're okay. No accusation, no shouting, just the exhaustion of a man who had learned to live through silence. He sat still. On the window pane, melted snow trailed into thin cracks. I realized the scariest people aren't the ones who hurt, but the ones who stand by and let it happen. You weren't cruel, I whispered. Just weak. And that weakness killed everything. I didn't cry. I simply folded my phone closed as gently as placing a flower on an old grave. No one won. I just stopped at the right time. The screen lit up. Mom, you've won. Happy now. No apology. Only venom. I sat in the small kitchen, the yellow light reflecting off the cold steel counter. Un moment later, I opened my laptop. Email subject line, final confirmation account termination. I typed slowly, each word cutting like scissors through the last remaining string. Dear Lakeview Bank, I confirm the completion of the process to remove my name from all loans related to the properties of Mr. Process. Robert and Mrs. Marilyn Dawson. I request the immediate cessation of all correspondence regarding these debts. Sincerely, Claire Dawson. I read it again. No need to add anything. No anger. No triumph. Just closure. Outside, the light from the building across the street shimmered through the snow, soft, blurred, and strangely beautiful. I hit send. The whoosh sound filled the air like a door sliding shut. Justice doesn't shout. It only echoes when every other sound has stopped. After sending the email, I turned off the lights. The city still glowed thousands of windows, thousands of stories. My phone lay silent on the table. No more vibrations. No more calls. I looked into the dark screen. Reflected, there was my own face, no longer the weak daughter I once was, but a woman who had touched justice with her bare hands by saying nothing at all. The last sound of the night was rain. Not a sad rain, but a cleansing one. I cracked the window open, letting the cold wind in. A flash of lightning glimmered across Lake Michigan. I whispered. As if to myself, I didn't abandon my family. I abandoned fear. The words dissolved into the rain. Above Chicago, the thunder drifted away, leaving behind a clear kind of silence, the kind I would never trade again. Sometimes, the wicked don't know they're wicked, they just believe they're victims. The next morning, I woke up in the fragile quiet of a new day. The phone didn't ring. The rain had stopped. I was about to make coffee when a message from Megan appeared. Claire, I don't want to alarm you, but you might want to see this. The link opened to Marilyn's Facebook page. Her profile picture showed her smiling in a navy blue dress, one arm around Ava's shoulder. Below it was a long post, words packed tight like an indictment, with a heavy heart. I have to say this. Sometimes, the child you trust most betrays the family in the cruelest way. Our daughter, Claire Dawson, lied to the bank, cost us our home, and left our youngest without her car. Everything we worked for destroyed. We paid her tuition, raised her, and helped her build her life in Chicago. And this is how she repays us. More than 100 comments poured in like hailstones. My name was dragged through the mud. Ungrateful, cold-blooded, city girl who forgot her roots. Familiar names: the old neighbor who once borrowed salt, a distant aunt in Indiana, and one of Mother's church friends, all signing with performative sympathy. Every word Marilyn wrote looked like it was soaked in tears. But between the lines lay the blade. She didn't mention the night she laughed when my graduation cake hit the ground, nor the $30,000 I'd paid off for her. She only chose the version of the story where she looked like the victim. I touched the rim of my cup. The porcelain was ice cold. No anger, no trembling, just a feeling I'd long expected when truth has no audience. People perform. I learned to stay silent even when I'm misunderstood. News travels faster than a lake wind off Michigan. At the office, a few coworkers stared longer than usual, then pretended to be busy. Lauren, my boss, sent only one line: if you ever need to talk. My door's open. I believe you. In the elevator, one engineer avoided my eyes as the doors closed. In the cafeteria, two strangers whispered behind me, their murmurs blending with the smell of ketchup. I set my tray down, hearing the faint clink of the fork against metal like a knock from another reality. I didn't explain. Those who seek truth will find me. Those who crave drama will stay on Marilyn's stage. That night, the emails kept coming. Poor your mother. Family is everything. Try forgiveness. I stopped counting. I made mint tea. Its cool scent slipped through the cracked window and brushed the Chicago night, sharp as needles. On the table, my laptop sat silent, a confidant who knew how to keep secrets. The city below still pulsed car horns, the rumble of the L train, and golden light pooling in puddles. I set my cup on its saucer. A thin swirl of steam rose, then vanished. I reminded myself, truth doesn't need argument. It just needs time. When the knocking on the door becomes the sound of the past, trying to reclaim its power. Around 10 p.m. Pounding echoed, not knocks, but blows from the back of a hand. Boom, boom, boom. Claire opened the door. Marilyn's voice pierced through the wood, sharp as a needle. You can't hid forever, Ava's voice followed. Shrill, cracking between sobs. Open up. Do you want us to starve? Tyler needs the car. Mom needs the house. You're a monster, I stood, my bare feet pressing into the cold wooden floor. In the corner, the desk lamp illuminated a photo I'd taken of Lake Michigan in early fall blue water. Clear sky, and a small sailboat. The calm in that image felt almost mocking compared to the storm outside my door. I didn't open it. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. The black and white screen flickered on. Two faces drenched in rain, mascara streaking like ink stains. Marilyn stared straight into the lens, furious. Yet behind it I saw something else: fear. Claire, open the door, she screamed hoarsely. I'm your mother. No, I whispered to myself softly, like speaking to the child inside me. You're the storm. and this door is my roof. Boom. 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 Neighbors posed, peering through peepholes. The dog in Unit 7B barked. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady as the ticking clock on the wall. I didn't shout back. I didn't beg. I didn't explain. I took my phone and dialed 911. Chicago Police Department. What's happening? Ma'am, my name is Claire Dawson. 2 people are pounding on my door and yelling. I'm scared. They're family, or they were. But tonight they're harassing me. I spoke slowly and clearly, like reciting an oath. Keep the door locked. A patrol is on its way. Please don't open it. I set the phone down and returned to the intercom. Rain lashed the hallway window like tighten strings. Ava leaned into the lens, screaming, "You made us lose everything. Do you hear me?" I heard. And I let it pass through me like winter wind, brushing a brick wall. Justice isn't only in court. Sometimes it's a door locked at the right moment. The sound of heavy boots stopped near the camera. A police officer in a raincoat stepped between them and my door. His voice even, and emotionless. "Ma'am, you're disturbing the peace. The resident has requested that you leave." Marilyn pointed toward me, or rather, toward the camera. "She's my daughter, she's lying about us, we just want to talk." She said no. "This is private property. You have 2 options, leave now. Or we file a report." His tone was low and steady, like a bolt sliding into place. Ava broke into sobs, yelling through tears. "She's killing us. She made the bank. The bank isn't here." The officer cut in. "But we are." At that moment, I saw the frame shake slightly. Marilyn stumbled back, pulling her hand away from the door, swallowing her rage. Not because she understood, but because she saw someone she couldn't manipulate. "We'll be back," she muttered, retreating step by step, dragging Ava along. The hallway emptied. Only the patter of rain on gray tiles and the static of a police radio remained, along with the soft ding of the elevator. I still didn't open the door. I stood there, one hand over my heart, feeling it beat calmly. The intercom had a 5-minute video archive. I pressed save, naming the file, Boundaries April 17th. Boundaries aren't walls. They're how we say, "I'm still here, but you don't get to touch me." When the hallway fell silent, I turned on the kitchen light. Warm yellow light spread across the steel counter, reflecting rain streaks on the window pane. I opened my laptop and dragged the video into a new folder titled Proof. The cursor hovered for a moment, then released. The clip settled inside the folder like an anchor sinking to the bottom of the sea. The phone buzzed a text from an unknown number, a screenshot showing that Marilyn's post had vanished. No more accusations. No more judgmental comments. Just a blank space like a stage after the curtain has fallen. I didn't know why she deleted it. Maybe someone reminded her of legal consequences. Maybe the bank had sent official papers. Or maybe a 5-minute intercom video was about to speak louder than her tears. I didn't need to know. I closed the laptop. In the room, the rain softened into a steady whisper. Soothing. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and looked down at the city. Car lights shimmered below, scattered like stretched glass beads. I placed my hand over my chest where it used to tighten every time my mother screamed. It didn't tighten anymore. I whispered, "Tomorrow, if they call again, what will I do?" The answer came as calmly as breathing. "I won't pick up. I'll start living." And just then, the phone buzzed again. Not Mom. Not Ava. An old number from my hometown. One single line lit up on the screen. "There's something about your father. Call me when you can." The sound of rain suddenly felt farther away. I stared at the glowing screen as the world outside blurred. Sometimes freedom doesn't come from an open door, but from a document proving you owe no one anything. Monday morning. The doorbell rang right at 8 o'clock. At the door stood a mail carrier in a windbreaker, gloves still damp with morning dew. He handed me a cream-colored envelope. its corner stamped with the Lakeview Bank logo. I stood still for a moment, hearing only the ticking clock inside my apartment. The envelope was heavier than I expected, like holding the weight of the last 3 years in my hand. I carried it to the kitchen, set it down on the cold steel table, and slowly cut the edge open. Inside was an official legal letter. Dear Ms. Claire Dawson, as of May 2nd, 2025, you have been fully released from all financial obligations related to the loans held by Mr. Bacon, Robert and Mrs. Marilyn Dawson. The bank hereby confirms there are no remaining liens or binding associations between you and said assets. Sincerely, George Patel, Legal Department, Lakeview Bank. I read it twice. The paper was thick. The ink still smelled new. At the bottom, the red embossed seal gleamed in the early sunlight. I ran my finger over the words, fully and legally released. It felt like removing an invisible ring I'd worn for far too long. I didn't win against anyone. I simply reclaimed myself. I laid the letter on the table and poured a fresh cup of coffee. The rising steam mingled with the scent of paper, forming a strange fragrance, the scent of a lawful, peaceful beginning. On the wall, the clock struck 8:30. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a diagonal beam across the table where the letter rested. I looked at it as if it were a certificate for the life I had just survived. I thought of the cake smashed onto the floor, the laughter, and the text that said, "Stay away forever." Then the soft whoosh of the email I sent, the pounding on my door, the red lights flashing in the hallway. All of it now, just layers of dust, no longer sharp. Justice doesn't arrive with applause or apologies. It comes in silence, and in one line confirming you are no longer bound. I smiled. Not widely, just enough for my lips to remember feeling again. When I delete one line, I know I'm rewriting my entire life. That afternoon, I opened my laptop. The familiar budget spreadsheet appeared. Column Mom's Mortgage, $400. Column Ava's SUV, $640. I moved the cursor and pressed delete. Both lines vanished, and the total at the bottom rose by $1,040 per month. A small number, but my freedom. I added a new row, my future. I looked at the sheet and laughed. Numbers had never sounded so musical. The apartment was quiet. I could hear the wind slipping through the crack in the window and the distant chime of the city clock tower. On the table, the letter still lay there, its corner slightly curved, as if smiling back at me. Sometimes happiness is simply sitting with people who never make you apologize for existing. That evening, I met Megan and Aaron at a small cafe by Lake Michigan. Sunset spilled across the water, mixing with a faint thread of jazz. Megan waved her red hair glowing like a small flame in the gray light. "You look different," she said. "The good kind of different," I smiled. Aaron chuckled. "Less caffeine. More freedom." We laughed. Not the forced kind that hides pain, but the real kind. Round and warm, with space for breath. Megan talked about her new design project, and Aaron about his upcoming trip to Colorado. I listened, thinking of no one else. For the first time in years, I was fully present in my own conversation. When we left, the lake wind brushed past. I pulled my scarf tighter and looked up at the sky. No one was waiting to criticize me for coming home late. No voice saying, "You owe your mother an apology." Only wind, laughter, and Chicago shining like a city I truly belonged to. No one has the right to define you by the wounds they caused. Define yourself by the way you heal. That night, I came home late. The letter from the bank was still in the same place, but the light from outside turned it silver. I stood by the window, looking out toward Lake Michigan. The water lay still, reflecting a ribbon of golden lights along the shore. I thought of my father's old saying, "Silence is golden, but don't let it bury you." Today, I had turned silence into freedom. I breathed slowly and wrote in my notebook. Freedom isn't the absence of memories. Freedom is when memories no longer control you. I closed the notebook and set it atop the letter. The light glided across both paper and leather before resting on my hand. Outside. A night ferry left the harbor, its horn long and deep, echoing through the sleepless city. I whispered, as if sending a message to whoever was listening to this story. If you ever have to choose between peace and a relationship, remember, peace is the place you can return to, even when no one's waiting. The light dimmed. Everything in the apartment grew still, but it was no longer loneliness. It was the calm I had built with my own hands. From every broken piece that once was me. Justice is not where the story ends, it's where it begins again. Morning light slipped through the white curtains, soft and thin as a new breath. The smell of coffee drifted across the small apartment. On the table, my notebook lay open on its final page. I sat down and wrote slowly, line by line. The pen touched the paper, a faint rustle, but it sounded like a steady heartbeat. 3 years ago, I wrote to prove that I still existed. Today, I write to prove that I have lived. Outside, Lake Michigan shimmered silver. A light breeze came through the window, rustling the page as if nodding in agreement. Not everyone deserves your return. I once thought justice was where a story ends. But now, looking back, I understand justice is only where we begin again. For the first time, in silence, I have forgiven them not because they deserve it, but because I no longer want to carry them for one more day. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. It simply means I no longer stand before it. Waiting. On the table, the letter from Lakeview Bank was still there. No longer evidence of debt, but proof that I had dared to live differently. If you ever have to choose between family and peace, choose peace. If you're listening to me now, maybe you've been through something like I have laughed at when all you wanted was love. I looked down on when all you wanted was to do what's right. I want you to know you're not alone. Someone once made you feel like you didn't matter. But you're still here. And that alone is proof that you are stronger than they ever imagined. Let your kindness stop being a burden. Choose peace. Even if it means leaving behind a place once called family. Because sometimes, peace is the answer. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Please like and subscribe, and share your own story in the comments. Because your voice matters.